Whenever we start a Revit project, there's really three things we need to think about first. The first thing will be the project origin point. To get a better feel for what the project origin is, I'm going to start off by going into the south elevation. In this case, the project origin point is going to be somewhere along here where level 1 is at. Now, if we want to see where that project origin point is actually physically located at, we can do this by going into the visibility graphics of the view. So I'm going to go to my properties and then select on Edit next to Visibility Graphics. Through here, I'm going to scroll down, and then when we see the Site category, we can expand it out. And there's an option here that says Project Base Point. If you put a check mark there and click on OK, you can see that this is the origin point. This is the base point by which this Revit model is located in three-dimensional space. Now, if we want to change where that origin point is at, we can do that. There's really a couple different ways we can. We can select on the origin point itself and then tell it it's at a certain elevation just by clicking on it and then typing it in. In this case, if I wanted the origin point to be 100 feet in the air, I could then click out in space after typing in 100 feet. Now it's lifted everything up 100 feet into the air. If we zoom out and then zoom in, we'll be able to see that this is now elevation 100 feet. The other way that we could have done this is going to be underneath the Manage tab. And then there's a project location area on the ribbon. Technically, there's two different ways we could manipulate this. One way would be to specify the coordinates at a point. So if you know that at a certain point, that's where you'd like your project origin to be, you could use that. In this case, though, since there's really nothing drawn, it'd be kind of difficult to do that. The other option that you have is Relocate Project. And by selecting on Relocate Project, you could then click and then tell it should be a certain distance up or a certain distance over. For instance, in this case, if I wanted to relocate the project 25 feet further up, I could. The next thing I want to show is that currently, these levels are still reporting 0 feet 0 inches for the first level and 10 feet for the second level. Now, this may be just fine, and if it is, you'd leave it the same. But if you wanted these levels to report what their actual real-world elevations are, what you need to do is select on the levels. If you already had one set up of a particular type, you could potentially choose the right type off of this type selector list, and it would automatically update itself. But in this case, we don't have one that will automatically give us that information. So in this instance, we need to click on Edit Type. And what I'd like to do in this case is just duplicate it. And we're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Example. From here, we can see that there's this elevation base. And right now, it's based off of the project base point. If we change this to be Survey Point instead, and then click on OK, we can now see that this one is now updated to be 125 feet. This one is now level example. If we change this one to be level example as well, we can now see it's reporting as being 135 feet. So to change that project base point so that everything is at the right elevation, you can turn on the project base point by going into the visibility graphics and then select on Edit and then turn on project base point. You can select on it and then just type in whatever elevation you'd like it to be, or even type in north, south, east, west if you want to slide it from one direction to another. Then you can update your levels accordingly by selecting on them and then coming over here to Edit Type and then changing it to be either Survey Point or Project Base Point. One last thing, once you get to this point, you'll want to make sure that you put in your grids. And you can put in your grids in one of two different views. In this case, I'm going to go back to the Architecture tab. Here underneath Structure, there's also Levels and Grids as well. But in this case, I'm going to select on Grid, and you'll see that you can draw in your structural grids either inside of a view like this, which is an elevation view, or draw in your grids in a floor plan view. And you can see that you can just plop these grids in. So those are the first three steps. Determine your project origin point, set your levels, and then begin by drawing in your individual grids.